copper mirror, who is the most handsomest of them all? Just so you know, this most of these sources are not actually coming attractions. They're from today and the past. So it's okay, because usually the parshiot of this Shabbos and next Shabbos are linked. Often they're linked. So don't worry, you're not getting old news. It's still relevant. And it's so good. It's such a good source that we're going to look at, this opening source, that I could not have us touch upon it and unpack it more and look at what Rashi has to say about it when it comes from Agada. So can I have a volunteer to read source 1? We also have a microphone to pass around so people online can be included and also hear your wonderful comments.
And he made the laver of copper and its stand of copper from the mirrors of the women who performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting.
Amazing. So this is often translated in numerous ways. It can be translated as the women of legions, the women of armies. It can be said that they performed rituals. Some say they did rituals. Some said they just did tasks. But I think the way that we translate it also is an interpretation. So if we look over to the Hebrew, there are 2 words that are bolded. Does someone want to read them and offer what do they think they could mean, or where they've seen these words or the root of this word in the past?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hatzivaot and Tzaveu.
Okay, does it remind you of something that you've heard of in the past? You've seen this word?
Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Hashem Tzavaot in the Kedusha.
Yeah, in the Kedusha. Also, it's often linked to around the IDF. So there's something interesting, like who exactly were these women and what exactly were they doing at the tent of meeting? And this is before the Mishkan has been built, so it's something separate, the tent of meeting. But it seems like they had an official role of some sort, and there was groups of them. There was like a whole unit of them doing some activity that was a task, and that may or may not have actually been paid for, that they did. They served a task, an important role, and it was a job. Can I have someone read for us source 2 for Rashi? And let's find a little bit about, so we still have questions of who they were and what specific their role was, but we're gonna unpack a little bit more. What was this wash basin of copper? And what were these mirrors that they donated? Someone to read Rashi for source 2? Does anyone also have any questions of why mirrors? If you were fleeing Egypt in the middle of the night for your freedom, would you think to pack a mirror with you? I mean, yeah, it's interesting. We know the women also packed their drums, their cymbals to dance with Miriam after splitting their Red Sea, but they also brought copper mirrors. I mean, I wonder how much their suitcases like weighed. You know, they might have had to pay extra if they were flying with TSA. So does someone want to read? Do you want to read the first paragraph in source 2? Okay. Yeah, just in the English. Do you want to read the English, the first paragraph?
I can try.
Hebrew is his first language.
You can, yeah, if you would read the Hebrew too.
I don't understand it.
Oh, come on.
Okay. From the mirrors of the women who had set up their legions, Israelite women owned mirrors of copper into which they used to look when they adorned themselves. Even these they did not hesitate to bring as a contribution toward the tabernacle. Now Moses was about to reject them since they were made to pander to their vanity. But the Holy One, read it. No, you have to read it. Now Moses was about to reject them since they were made to pander to their vanity. One moment. But the Holy One, blessed be He, said to him, accept them. These are dearer to me than all the other contributions because Through them, the women reared those huge hosts in Egypt.
Amazing. Thank you for reading. Great reading. Yeah, so what did they rear in Egypt? They made a lot of
Babies.
babies. Okay, so can you imagine the scene? There are these women that are in these legions or in these units. They perform tasks, may or may not be paid for at the tent of meeting. There's an official role. Are they doing rituals? What's actually happening? They're donating these copper mirrors to Moses. And Moses says, no, I don't want these. These are for vanity. And what does God say to Moses? God says, accept them. These are dearer to me than all the other contributions, all the other truma. Any thoughts about this?
Yes, we talked about this last night in our show,
Yeah.
and we were talking about that because when you make the future, it's not, the most holiest task is to make the future. It should be very positive. So why, when you adorn yourself to make yourself beautiful, to make your husband want you to make a child, so why not would these mirrors want to be in the Mishkan?
Beautiful. So in talking about Jewish continuity, that there's something beautiful within them, and these copper mirrors, we're going to soon see, as Rashi's going to share with us, have a role in the Jewish continuity. And also, we're going to soon read that God really loves love between people, love between partners, and that part of that love between partners, it can be playful and also in turn include how we adorn each other and ourselves. And I just think it's so interesting because what Moses saw in these mirrors was vanity and something disgraceful that doesn't belong in a holy place. But sometimes things are not as they seem, that he couldn't see clearly. Moses couldn't see clearly. Even though there's a mirror, he couldn't see clearly of what the mirrors represented and what was actually being reflected back to him about this donation. So I'm going to read the second paragraph here on the first source. And it is gendered, so I just want to say that. But this is a story that comes down to us in Midrash, and it's very interesting of how playful it is and also how it draws on Shir Shirim. So, for when their husbands were tired through the crushing labor, and probably they themselves, they used to bring them food and drink to eat, and they encouraged them to have a connection and be on a date. Then they would take the mirrors and each gazed at herself in her mirror together with her husband, saying endearingly to him, see, I am more handsome than you. Thus they awakened their husband's affections and subsequently became the mothers of many children. As it says, referencing in the future Shir Shirim, I awaken thy love under the apple tree, referring to the fields where the men worked and where they would come out and have these like dates or connections. And so this is what it refers to when it says they were mot hatzevot, the mirrors of the women who reared the host. Here they're translating from Midrash Takuma, Sifaot meaning these hosts, as many children they had, versus being legions or being large units. And so there's another piece that Rashi brings here, I think that is really interesting. Based on these mirrors, we're about connection and love. And in a way we can say shalom bayit, this idea of bringing together peace in the house, that it was so important they be used for the creation of the water basin. And it is for this reason that the laver, the water basin or wash basin, was made of the mirrors, because it served the purpose of promoting peace between man and wife. By giving of the waters to be drunk by a woman whose husband had shown himself jealous of her and who nevertheless had associated with another, thus affording her an opportunity to prove her innocence. And this is from Sota. So in the story about the Sota, it's in our Torah, as well as we find a lot about it that is in the Talmud. If there happens to be jealousy between a man and a wife, a husband and woman, and the man is suspecting that she cheated, and there's a high price to be paid for adultery in biblical times, in ancient times, there was this ceremony available to restore peace between them. So the woman would come, and the Kohen Gadol would give her water to drink, floor of the Mishkan or of the Beit HaMikdash, the future temple, and would dissolve God's name into the water, and she would drink it. If she was innocent, nothing happened. If she was guilty, her stomach would explode. We don't know of any cases of a woman's stomach exploding. And then it said that if she drank it and everything was okay, she should go home. They should restore Shalom Bayit, peace in the house. And if she came pregnant, it was a blessing and no questions would be asked. Now we know that we're never supposed to use God's name in vain or create images of God or erase God's name. But it says about the Sota that God cared so much about love between people and love between partners that God was willing to have their name be erased in water for the sake of Shalom Bayit and love. And so in a way that these mirrors the women had in Egypt that were about love could be used for love and their future protection with this basin. And so if you flip the page over, you're going to see a little bit more of this source from Rashi. And you'll also see source 3, which is what I just described in Numbers 5:17. The Kohen shall take holy water in an earthen vessel and some earth from the Mishkan floor, and the Kohen shall take and put it into the water. And I'm just going to read the Rashi from there as well, so we can see how it loops back. I don't know how Rashi did all of this without any ChatGPT to match all the different documents together. So Rashi says, holy water. This water wasn't just any water. It was holy because it had been sanctified while in the washstand. By being in that copper basin, it became holy. For the washstand was made from the copper of the mirrors of the women who had gathered, and they had in love been with their husbands in Egypt beneath the apple tree, linking to Shir Shirim for the future when it would be written, inspiring that line, whereas the one who had potentially corrupted herself or had been accused of it with another, let her be examined through it, this washstand. And so I think it's just so interesting about something in this mirror wasn't what it seemed like it was going to be, but it had a different meaning to it, and how important it was that God had these mirrors be collected and donated and made into a washstand for the women in the future, and how that these mirrors turned the water holy, like some kind of alchemy was happening with them, and about this sake of love that God was willing to have God's name be erased in the process. And I think it's also interesting here too, Rashi says here, using the word, it's playing around as if they gathered, were they legions, hosts, units. So if we can flip back to source 1, I think it's just interesting about if we were going to say it's gathered, because the whole Torah portion by Akil is about and they gathered. So maybe it's not actually means that they gathered at the tent of meeting at its opening. There was something more official capacity that they had. So I pointed out because I want to see that there might have been more agency women had in ancient times that we often negate and we don't think about that's happening. And in just the final 2 minutes that we have, let's turn back again to source 5 and 6. And I just wanted us to reflect on different sections in the Torah about giving of items and how necessarily it wasn't the material, it was the way it was given that had a lot to do with how it would be received and what it might be used for or what it could turn into. Does someone want to read source 5 in English or in Hebrew?
All the people unburdened separated themselves of the gold rings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron.
Thank you. This from Kitesa, which is basically when they're donating the gold that's going to be thrown in the fire by Aaron, and it comes out as a golden calf. And the term is really interesting about, it's not that they're necessarily giving it, they're unburdening or separating themselves from it. Maybe there was like, oh, I don't want to give it. It's like my favorite stuffed animal. I don't want to share it with someone else. This is my cookie. I'm not sharing half the cookie with someone else. I don't want to give this gold. Does it mean if they had this separation? Does it mean that they unburdened it? It was so heavy on them, they didn't want it anymore. There was some kind of guilt or something around it. So it's very interesting when we look at what could be happening here and about the way that they gave of the gold of their ears to the golden calf. I think it's also interesting that it says Oznaim, there's a lot of reference to the ears in this by Mount Sinai and the giving of the Ten Commandments, that everyone had to hear it in their ear, or maybe all the Jewish people, all Bnei Israel, the Israelites had one ear when they heard it. And also around as someone who has been found stealing and can't pay double for what they've stole, they actually can become like an indentured servant. And if they choose not to leave their host family, they can actually bring their ear to the mezuzah, the mezuzot, the doorpost, and they'll have their ear pierced because they had heard from their ear not to steal, and also about being free people. And so there's something about here, these Bnei Israel had just heard with their ears, and yet they took off the gold of their ears. Something about, they heard with their ears about their freedom, being a free people and receiving the 10 Commandments, and then they're stripping it. They want to unburden themselves maybe from the responsibility of being free, which I think is so interesting to think about. Is like, I know we all love freedom. In America, that's a big value of us that we have, you know, for many people, but in America, we really life, liberty, and freedom. But how often sometimes we're thinking about, you know, Pesach already coming, maybe some of us already are preparing the house and doing spring cleaning, that like, we want freedom, but you know, we have a lot of still inner pharaohs in our life. You know, how do you have a pharaoh in your life? I know for me, or when I want to reference golden calf, I'm very much addicted to my screens. I'll tell myself I'll put my phone in the other room when I go to sleep, and then I'll still get up and get it and bring it into bed with me. And I think I'm free, but clearly the phone, it become my golden calf, has more control over me. So I think it's so interesting here is that they heard about their freedom. They left Egypt. They received the Torah. They heard about their freedom, but they weren't ready yet for that maybe responsibility of freedom, to wear the gold on their ears, to be royal, to be like this idea of free people, and that they gave it because they needed something else, an in-between to worship with the golden calf. So I just want to compare this to source number 6, if someone wants to read.
Men and women, all whose hearts move them, all who would make an elevation wave offering of gold to Adonai, came bringing brooches, earrings, rings, and pendants or armbands, gold objects of all kinds.
Amazing. So in this time, that moved their heart. It was connected to the heart. They gave all the gifts of all these different items. So it was still the same gold in both scenarios, but there's something different in the way that they gave. Were they giving as free people in love, or were they trying to unburden themselves from the freedom? And I think that's interesting too, if we flip back when we're thinking about the copper, of these copper mirrors that were given from a place of like love, that had been about love between partnership. And when we think about too, a lot of times when people are enslaved or indentured, or we think about, you know, even people in the US that are not getting a living wage, one thing that happens is they don't have health care, they're probably not eating well, and maybe they forget how important their partnerships are in their own life and their own family units that they have, because they don't have enough energy, they're too burnt out. So I think this, when we think about what does it mean if we want to pursue freedom for others, what is it actually, what makes someone free? And so as we're moving into Passover, and you know, these Shabbats leading up to it are very important for Passover. It's all the preparatory work that we're doing. We can start thinking about what really in our lives makes us free, and how do we really want to help others be free? What can we do? And how can we take the action before Passover, if it's volunteering or donating tzedakah, this idea of donating items, hopefully from our heart, to really allow others to be free, so that everyone can be free. And all these items were used to make the Mishkan, or the traveling tabernacle. I know we think like, when we translate a word, it's going to be easier to comprehend. So we translate Mishkan to tabernacle, and you're like, what, who? But this idea of a sacred place that the divine could dwell in and come to earth, there could be more consciousness. So as we're cleaning for our house for Pesach, we might have a lot of anxiety. But what if we're just preparing our house to also be like a Mishkan, so that the divine, the Shekinah, can dwell there? So what will you need to do to make your house more Mishkan-like? So as you're thinking about what does it mean to be a free person, what does it also mean as Passover is coming up that you want to create in your home, so that it's a sanctuary for you and for others, and that it's a place that there can be divine, the divine feminine, the Shekinah, as the divine feminine, can dwell. And as you're building your own sanctuary, how do we create sanctuary for other people?